مقتل الرئيس اليمني السابق علي عبد الله صالح.
The former president of Yemen has been killed.
قرار إعدام خميني 100%.
Yemen's ousted president was known for shifting loyalties.
على حساب حليفهم. The killing of Ali Abdullah Saleh has plunged Yemen into even more uncertainty.
Hello, I'm Richard Gisbert, and you're at The Listening Post. Here are some of the media developments we're tracking this week. The Yemen story is back where it belongs, in the headlines. It took the assassination of the former president to get it there. Australia becomes the latest country where the government is taking a long look at Google and Facebook and what those mega companies are doing to the news industry. Spain and the political talk shows that are on the air in the daytime, prime time, just about any time. And the New York Times, Saudi Arabia, and the decades-old story of reform that has yet to happen. The story of the late former president of Yemen, Ali Abdullah Saleh, was never a straightforward one. Why would the coverage of his death be any different? Tune in to the Saudi Arabian version, and Saleh's killing this past week by Houthi rebels is used as justification for continuing the bombing campaign, a war that has already claimed as many as 10,000 lives and left millions suffering in what's being called the world's worst current humanitarian disaster. Pro-Houthi media saw Saleh's savage end as a blow to Saudi efforts to overthrow them. Foreign audiences can be forgiven their confusion over the causes of this conflict, given that much of the coverage of the war's primary architect, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia, has been effusive, even enthusiastic. There's been little reporting of the behind-the-scenes roles that Britain and the U.S. are playing, underwriting the Saudis with arms, expertise, and diplomatic cover. There are plenty of angles to this story, including the alleged role Iran is playing in Yemen, an angle long on allegations, short on proof. Our starting point this week is the Yemeni capital, Sana'a.
If you want to understand the context behind the assassination of Ali Abdullah Saleh, look away from the images of the chaotic, gruesome aftermath captured on a phone camera that served as the visual starting point for so much of the breaking news coverage. Look instead at the way Saudi-owned news media have covered Saleh over the years. Those channels served as weather vanes, constantly shifting, whichever way the geopolitical winds were blowing in Riyadh.
The pro-Saudi media had moved from one narrative to another, first of all referring to him as the president of Yemen.
هذه كلمة للرئيس اليمني علي عبد الله صالح.
And then they were referred to him as the former dictator of Yemen.
صالح تجاوز القذافي في تمسكه بالسلطة.
The former corrupt leader of Yemen.
استغل صالح حسابات مصرفية في جزر نائية لتمرير أموال ضخمة.
We've seen such radical shifts in coverage that it was quite amusing in social media, and many young Arabs were making fun of the shift to give the contrast between 2 days ago and now. And in fact, there was one particular Saudi journalist who in the past had heaped scorn on Ali Abdullah Saleh, and yet when he was killed, he basically declared him to be this great martyr of Arabism and so on. So it was, there was a lot of amusement in that regard.
The problem with the press, the Saudi-backed press or Saudi-funded press, like all Arab-funded press establishments, is that it is simply a propaganda tool. And therefore, we shouldn't take it as a reflection of any independent thinking, but as a reflection of the political views of the power elite at that moment, because that view can change the next day, just as Ali Abdullah's position changed overnight.
If Yemenis are confused by the shifting way their story is being told, they can always watch state-owned Yemen TV. They just have to decide which one. There's the one based in Sana'a, on the air since 1975, now controlled by the Houthi government, and the one Saudi Arabia launched in 2015, that's beamed into Yemen from Riyadh. Two channels with the same name offering distinctly different versions of the same story.
The creation of the Yemen TV that is broadcasting out of Riyadh gave some space to the Houthi opponent.
وثمن المواقف الأخوية المشرفة لقادة التحالف العربي بقيادة المملكة العربية السعودية الشقيقة.
Yet I think it hasn't been able to convince the public opinion inside Sana'a.
The Saudi funded Yemeni media never really achieved their goal. In fact, there is an increase of Houthi-owned media. And you have to understand that in Yemen, only 26% of the population have an access to internet, and most of the Saudi-supported Yemeni media are taking their platform on the internet. So they're speaking to an audience that's outside, but not inside the country. They're never being able to reach the masses on the ground.
When they do try to reach the Yemeni masses, Saudi news outlets spend a lot of airtime talking about Iran.
ومواجهة القوى الانقلابية التي تبين أنها أحد أذرع إيران في المنطقة وتنفذ مخططا لها في اليمن.
The narrative goes like this. Shia Iran seeks influence through its Houthi proxies in pursuit of a larger regional hegemony that represents a threat to any Arab country, particularly states with sizable Sunni populations. It was on that basis that Saudi Arabia led the war in Yemen that started in 2015. That war has since turned into a stalemate, a humanitarian catastrophe. And, like the military offensive it was supposed to bolster, the Saudi narrative on Iran has grown less popular, less credible with time.
From very early on, from 2012 and beyond, there was an insistence in Gulf media in general, but in Saudi media in particular, that there is this very clear plot by the Iranian government.
إنه قرار إعدام خميني 100%.
The Gulf media in general did not at any point concede that there are certain religious differences, sectarian differences, between Shiite Twelvers and between the Houthis. And the Americans were from very early on skeptical about the claims of Arab media about the strong relationship and alliances between the Iranian government and the Houthis.
The claim that the Houthis are a proxy of Iran in Yemen is ludicrous. And most knowledgeable observers of the Middle East don't take it very seriously. And this is a real problem because if suddenly the Saudis and the Iranians enter into negotiations, which will happen eventually, it has to, the Arab media that is close to Saudi Arabia or funded by it is suddenly going to turn on a dime, and they're going to suddenly talk about Iran as a strategic partner and a good neighbor, and we live together in respect and peace. So the credibility of the media has been terribly, terribly damaged all across the Arab world when the Saudis and others use it to push a propagandistic case.
The Saudis have also pushed their case in the international media through a public relations offensive aimed at diplomats and news organizations. That has borne fruit in the relatively positive reviews for the new Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, who championed the same war in Yemen that has morphed into a quagmire. The PR offensive may have led the international news media to divorce the humanitarian side of this story from the political, to divorce the effect from the cause.
If you compare how they covered another humanitarian tragedy in Syria, they were very keen and specific of holding exclusively the Assad regime responsible. I mean, certainly the Assad regime is responsible partly for the tragedy of Syria, as are the Syrian rebels.
The Anglo-American media has been criminally complicit in not reporting accurately about what actually is going on in Yemen in terms of the deeper context of who is responsible or who is engaged in the war in Yemen. It's presented as a great tragedy.
The conflict, now in its third year, has created this man-made disaster.
It's presented as a humanitarian crisis.
This is what the world's largest humanitarian crisis looks like.
But they tend not to report the involvement of the British and American government and other Western governments in arms sales to the Saudis and Emiratis, helping refuel airplanes, intelligence and reconnaissance, and the political cover that they often give by trying to protect Saudi Arabia.
The Houthi authorities can claim victim status in this Saudi-led media war, but they are hardly innocent parties. Their version of state-owned Yemen TV is tightly controlled. and they have shown little tolerance for critical reporting by Yemeni journalists.
It's not a shrinking place for independent and local press landscape. It's almost like zero space. As we speak, there are about 41 media individuals arrested in the hands of Houthis, storming into many institutions that include also Ali Abdullah Saleh led media offices. Yemen used to be a complicated story. It is today an absolutely more complicated than ever before. The only media that exists today in Yemen, it's absolutely in control of the Houthi rebel group.
Shifting narratives coming out of Riyadh. Twin Yemen TV channels, identical in name, ideologically opposed in nature. Humanitarian effects overshadowing geopolitical causes. And a Saudi charm offensive that seems to be working. There's a lot to the Yemen story, more than the media on either side have given it.
We're discussing other media stories that are on our radar this week with one of our producers, Tariq Nafi. Tariq, according to the Washington Post's calculations, in his first 318 days in the White House, Donald Trump has tweeted about fake news 155 times. That's roughly once every 48 hours, and it turns out he is not the only American who sees the U.S. news media that way.
Clearly not, Richard. A survey on media trust by Poynter has found that nearly half of Americans, 44%, say that the media fabricates stories about Donald Trump. And if you talk to Trump supporters, that figure rises to 77%. And more than 2/3 of Americans, 69%, say that the media tend to favor one side. But here's the part that sounds slightly contradictory. The same figure, 69% of Americans, say that the media helps keep politicians in check. And Poynter says that overall, the trust in the media has probably increased since Trump came to office, and that could be because of the renewed interest in the role that the media plays as a watchdog.
And this data comes out just as Donald Trump is tussling with yet another journalist from another news outlet over the coverage of the Russia-Trump election collusion investigation.
Yes, last weekend ABC ran an explosive and widely cited story about former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn. The story said that Flynn had been directed by Trump during the presidential campaign to contact Russian political operatives. It turns out that that media story was false, and ABC was forced to issue a clarification, which later turned into a correction. And the network has now suspended the reporter in question, Brian Ross, who is their chief investigative correspondent, for 4 weeks.
Here at the Listening Post, we spend a lot of time examining the digital revolution, the impact it's had on the traditional news industry. Looks like Australia's is the latest government that wants to take a long, hard look at that very question. What is going on down under?
Yes, so the internet at one stage was supposed to transform the fortunes of news media outlets by giving them new ways of raising funds, namely online advertising. But it hasn't quite worked out that way, and for one big reason. Two companies have monopolized online advertising, Facebook and Google. It's estimated that this year, that between them, they'll capture 84% of global digital ad spending. And so this past week, Australia's competition regulator announced that it would investigate how those two online giants have disrupted the news media market.
And obviously, this is not a problem that's unique to Australia, is it? Other governments have looked at this.
Absolutely. The European Union is preparing to fine Google with an antitrust penalty over its powerful advertising network, AdSense. And that will be the second fine handed down by the EU to Google this year, after Google was forced to pay a record 2.4 billion euros for skewing its search results to promote its online shopping services. And pressure is also coming from the news industry. The News Media Alliance, which represents 2,000 news outlets in the US and Canada, is lobbying Congress for permission to collectively be able to negotiate with the likes of Facebook and Google with the aim, it hopes, of building a more sustainable future for the news business.
Bring a little clout to the negotiating table. Desperate measures in what for the news industry are desperate times. Tariq Nafi, thanks.
Thanks, Richard.
Television programming in Spain has undergone a bit of a transformation over the past decade, changes that are partly driven by economics, partly by politics. Ever since the banking crisis of 2008, the country's been in a semi-constant state of political upheaval, a series of corruption scandals, inconclusive elections, and more recently, Catalonia's run at independence have kept Spaniards glued to their televisions, watching pundits, talking 24/7. That has given rise to a wave of political talk shows that the Spanish call tertulias. These programs meet two important criteria. They provide the political flashpoints that audiences seem to like, and they're cheap to produce. However, the discussion is not always balanced. Public broadcasters, in particular, have been known to engineer talk show panels to promote their government's agendas. The Listening Post's Cristina Martinez now on tertulias and how they've changed the way Spaniards see politics.
Seguimos en Buenos Días, Madrid. Tarda benvinguts a Tarda Oberta d'aquí uns minuts.
Muy buenas noches y bienvenidos a la noche en 24 horas.
Tertulias.
Spanish political talk shows that offer a running commentary on the day's news are dominating television output hour
Es tremenda la imagen política que están ustedes dando, señores.
after hour after hour.
Y representa la peor basura del periodismo.
¿Me permite una pregunta? No.
Even during prime time on a Saturday night, a tertulia, La Sexta Noche, competes for audiences with films and entertainment shows, turning the driest economic and political material into a television spectacle, and political pundits into celebrities.
Tengo una duda. Si se gana, luego podemos hablar el doble.
A veces se mira con...
The medium of television is often looked down upon, but it has actually managed to make politics relevant. And I believe that television has an ability which the printed press doesn't have anymore. TV has made politics more open, accessible. The fact that our national debate is now considered premium content and is watched by many people feels fantastic.
Eso es fantástico. Eso es fantástico.
De las tertulias de crónica social, tipo Salva.
Political debates seem to have adopted the practice of gossip shows to get record audiences, and it looks like it's working.
Me han contado, dime solo si es verdad, que te llamaban Don Pantuflo. ¿Es verdad?
Behavior that previously would have been unthinkable is now accepted, like biased interventions by moderators or the use of insults during prime time.
Digo, si vamos a lo personal, está usted muy gordita para el hambre que se pasa. Pero no es necesario.
Sí que es verdad. It is true that lately, politics are as widespread on television as cooking or football shows, with practically the same kind of structure. But that isn't negative. Debating is a good thing, and it has its roots in our literary circles and cafe culture. Also, this format has been very successful because it's much cheaper to produce.
Y del formato.
Which counts, given how hard the Spanish media were hit in 2008. The same economic recession that saw housing prices collapse and Spain's GDP tank forced media outlets to come up with cheaper forms of programming. By 2011, the recession had sparked an anti-austerity movement that took to the streets and infiltrated TV studios.
Gracias por estar aquí, haber dejado por un par de horas la Puerta del Sol.
Some channels saw an opportunity, producing tertulias that were political with an element of showbiz. The industry was in crisis and found a winning formula.
Creo que hubo una especie de miopía.
I think that mainstream media at the time were badly myopic. Public opinion was heading one way and the media in another. Some TV channels understood this problem, like La Sexta, that the public wanted explanations of what was happening to them. Perhaps also because the economic crisis hit mainstream media outlets too, and they were made very financially dependent. This affected their editorial lines. They lacked freedom.
Since the crisis, the hours people spend watching TV have increased greatly. Why? Because people don't have enough money to go out for dinner. Sales of frozen pizzas and other ready meals have rocketed. The appetite for politics has rocketed too. A debate will get you a bigger audience than a blockbuster or a good series, and on a smaller budget.
Tertulias aren't just Spain's new political battleground. They are a launching pad. In 2013, a conservative TV channel, Intereconomía, signed up a relative unknown, a leftist professor of politics, to counter right-wing voices on his best-known tertulia, El Gato al Agua.
Pablo Iglesias, muy buenas noches. Lo primero, daros las gracias por la invitación. Es un gusto cruzar las líneas enemigas.
Within a year, Pablo Iglesias had become the third most recognized commentator in the country. And the new political party he co-founded, Podemos, finished third in its first election. The times and the Spanish media were changing.
We can see this clearly in Antonio Carmona's 2013 close meeting with other Socialist Party members.
No nos preocupemos demasiado por lo que sale en los periódicos, porque un periódico, por ejemplo, una noticia de un periódico la leen 133 personas. Sin embargo, sales en televisión y te ven, esto lo hemos hablado alguna vez, 7 millones de personas.
Los políticos se han dado cuenta del enorme potencial.
I think politicians suddenly realized the incredible impact the media can have, especially the political tertulias, in helping spread their electoral program and political ideas.
Where political tertulias tend to fail Spanish audiences is in the area of plurality, a problem that affected publicly funded channels during the debate over Catalonian independence. TVE is Spain's national public broadcaster. TV3 is its equivalent in Catalonia. The heads of both channels are appointed by politicians. TVE's tertulias were loaded with anti-independence voices.
Disuelvan el Parlamento, este maldito Parlamento que nos ha traído hasta aquí.
While TV3's tilted the other way, providing only token unionist voices, heavily outnumbered by the other side.
Why did I stop going to TV3? Because TV3 is one of the tools of the Catalan independence movement to manipulate opinion using fake news, to make people think that there's an oppressive government that is repressing Catalonia. TV3 presents Spain as underdeveloped and full of stupid people, and ultimately I had the feeling that by participating in their debates, I was becoming their useful idiot.
I can tell you how hard it can be to find a pundit who's not pro-independence. They argue that they don't believe in this debate, so their very presence would mean that they're recognizing that independence could be possible at some point in time. Having said that, we have a mandate from the Catalan Parliament, and therefore, we try to reflect the composition of the Parliament around the table.
In tertulias, there are always two ideological flanks, but they are uneven. About a quarter of tertulias invite a majority of speakers of one ideology and just one representative of the counter-ideology, the so-called useful idiot. In the rest of the tertulias, the moderator clearly supports one side. So while it looks like there's plurality, in fact there isn't.
Spain's televised tertulias have helped to magnify politics.
Digamos, una mirada destroyer, irónica, inteligente sobre la política.
Normalize informality.
Incluso tiene usted otras fórmulas más directas. Me la trae al fresco, me la reflanflinfla.
And dramatize debate.
Ojalá un tal M. Rajoy algún día esté con una de estas.
Take a 5-minute speech in Congress. Add a few guests around the table, and you get hours of entertainment on the cheap. This is a recipe that Spanish broadcasters like.
Rufián trabaja poco, muy poquito y además cobra mucho.
But whether the end result is a more informed public is another matter entirely.
Political debates and political communication in Spain have changed completely because of the tertulias, and moreover, there's no going back to the past. This is good for democracy. We have always said that Spain is a country where politicians are our main problem, and yet we've ended up with politicians on all channels at all hours. We have gone from being a country of bullfighters and flamenco singers, so to say, to being a country of footballers and politicians.
And finally, the New York Times is among many Western news outlets to opine recently that the new guard in Saudi Arabia, led by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, may finally be bringing meaningful reform to the kingdom. Stop us if you've heard that one before or read it before in the pages of the Times. Those articles got one historian, Abdullah Al-Arian, scrolling back through 70 years of the newspaper's archives to see just how often the Times has reported that the Saudis are changing their ways, reforming or modernizing. He found at least 27 such stories. 27. Now, had even half of them been accurate, the Saudis wouldn't have anything left to reform. We've selected a few of those articles in which the Times' journalism on Saudi Arabia has proven to be a triumph of alleged reform over substance. We'll see you next time here at The Listening Post.